It's going.
I'll intro it.
We're already started. That is
No.
now included.
Nope. I edit it.
Okay.
So this is all out.
Okay.
Or is it?
Or is it? We'll see. We'll see what people hear.
Welcome to the Food Tech News Show. I'm Carl Zardella.
I'm Mike Wolf.
And we're going to talk about food tech news because that's the name of the show.
Yeah. Good thing it's not Dog Snacks Weekly.
I mean, it could be. It could be food tech dog snacks, which are
That's
thing.
our new food adjacent podcast. We're spinning out dog snack news show.
That comes out next week.
Because there's so much news around dog snacks. But how you doing, Carl? We skipped a week. And
we did.
It's middle of summer, dog days of summer. And because of that, we don't have a guest joining us because everyone's on vacation. So It's just the regulars, the hardcores.
It's just us. It's the legit old school podcasters. We've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. We should actually do a retrospective of sometime around our podcast career. By the way, have we ever talked on the podcast? We have some little extra time. How we met?
I think we did. Maybe like to a guest and they were like, stop, we don't want to hear it.
Yeah. Maybe. And feel free to skip ahead a couple minutes. But I met you in San Francisco. You're living down there. And I was working for the tech blog Gigome. I was guesting my editor at Gigome, Sebastian Rupley. Not the fabulous Mr. Ripley, but the fabulous Mr. Rupley. He goes, "Hey, do you want to go on the?" It was. What was the name of the show? Is from John, your old editor. Like he was the guy running it.
Yeah, John Dvorak.
Cranky Geeks. John Dvorak. John Dvorak, a pretty famous seminal PC Mag columnist. I think that was his mag. He was the columnist for. And everyone knew him in that era, like the 2000s. That was because I think it was like 2009, around that time, 2009, 2010.
And he was doing that magazine for a long time. And I remember it like he had the back page of that magazine. Magazines, young people, were a thing. They kind of still are. But in the back page, he'd be always angry, and I'd read that angry article and I love it.
Yeah, that was a style of like tech columnist, the angry, somewhat skeptical PC or technology columnist, which I think, Walt Mossberg was kind of in that school. And I think it was like they were angry and a little bit skeptical at a time when I think everyone was over optimistic about technology. And we're kind of diverging from the point here, but that was John Dvorak. And you were helping to run the podcast, and his co-host was Adam Curry, which was a famous MTV VJ. He ran the company, right?
Yeah, and so I worked for a little company called Mevio, which worked with Ziff Davis. So that was the connection. I got to work on Cranky Geeks and DLTV. Do you remember DLTV?
Yep.
Robert Heron and stuff. And so like I produced a bunch of shows, and then I was on a bunch of shows. Then I had my own shows, but I worked with Ziff Davis and Mevio, and Adam Curry was part of Mevio. So it was a really weird, small group of people who all knew each other, but they were all from all walks of life. And John, like you said, I read his magazine, and he was all of a sudden working with me, and I was giving him notes, and it's so weird.
Yeah.
And then you showed up.
Me showed up, and your whole life changed. No, seriously.
I don't know about that.
I showed up there, and for me, it was one of those weird experiences because, having been a child of the 90s, late, 80s and 90s, I had watched MTV. And so to see like a guy who's on my TV screen as an MTV VJ, then sitting across from me doing a podcast with him, and I didn't know the dude is a giant. Like he's got to be what 6'6".
He's
like,
super tall. Yeah.
Like Adam Stern, Howard Stern tall, right? Like
he's super tall.
He's like a blonde Howard Stern, and those two guys I think are still podcasting. They have another podcast.
They still do No Agenda. Yeah.
No Agenda, which is a little more political, etc. But those guys are still going. Anyway, for anyone who cares, maybe like all three of you who care, there's the backstory.
Well, and to finish that story, I remember I was running around when you were on the show. So, when you mentioned Adam, like I was really lucky and just kind of like thrown into it in when I worked in San Francisco, where we met like a ton of people who were in quotes famous or internet famous all the time. And so that's why for me, it wasn't as big of a deal with Adam because he worked at our company and he was just someone else who helped us get it going. And then we met a bunch of other famous people, and I met Snoop Dogg and just met all these people that came through the tech world at that time. And that's a whole other podcast in itself. But it was interesting because it actually got me very comfortable with famous people. And so then it was no thing. You know what I mean? When people showed up and they were like at the table with Crank Geeks or some show that we were doing, I was like, yeah, okay, let's get it going. Let's just
Yeah,
roll.
but I feel like there's internet and Silicon Valley famous, and that's different than real world famous. Like, and I'll take my old boss. Like, Malik was Twitter famous because for some reason the algorithm had him go up to 1 million followers, like in a matter of a year.
Yeah.
And then he's like, that's all he's at now. Like, I think he stopped. I think like they had him as Twitter optimized the algorithm. And, you know, he was a pretty seminal tech blogger. He started the early Gigome, but he's kind of Silicon Valley famous. He back then was internet famous. He's not real world famous. And there was a lot of those people around back then, I feel like.
I agree. But if you've seen like Silicon Valley, the show, you know that a lot of those tech companies had parties with famous people at them.
True.
You know,
and so it's real famous people versus just Silicon Valley famous.
The cross section happened, you know, and like when I covered E3, we'd meet like Adam West and just random ass, like really, really popular people, and they would just be part of that thing. So it was interesting how SF brought those two worlds together. And there's your story for today. Now
we'll create a section. We'll call like a segment called Mike and Carlos Ramble. That's that section.
Okay.
We're done with that section for the day. And we're going to get to the stories, the food tech news stories we have 4 this week. And the first one is AI wants to count your calories. It's a story that was in Wall Street Journal this morning. And the story is about some research being done in Canada that is leveraging artificial intelligence to analyze food bite by bite. There are researchers working at the University of Waterloo in Ontario. And the person who is building this, or who's directing this, Alexander Wong, said, "We're starting to see tech that can decompose foods and have a better understanding of individual parts in a meal. The research aims to improve old-fashioned food journals and smartphone apps that can estimate calories and nutrients based on photographs of plated meals or scans of barcodes on packaged foods." In other words, that old food logging, I don't know if you've ever done food logging, which has been around for like at least a decade to 2 decades. Some people do it. It's super labor intensive. That's why it never works. And that's why this is kind of exciting if technology can really work to help make this easier. Wong and his colleagues use video footage recorded with a cell phone to measure the amount of food on a spoon as it travels from the dish to the mouth. And the algorithm doesn't identify the type of food, but can measure portion size, which is a first step to deducing the calories and nutritional content of food as it's eaten. It's interesting, Carlos, like this type of technology, this type of research, combined with like what January AI is doing, where they have this app that snaps a picture of your food and actually predicts based on the image what the impact of your blood sugar can be. Mm-hmm. It seems like the pieces are coming together to finally just, instead of like, hey, I'm going to like log in a journal what I ate.
Yeah.
Computer vision, AI, it seems like the pieces are coming together to make technology really watch what you're eating and help you kind of track what you're eating and count all the calories, etc.
The tricky thing, and it's always been this way, you know, we talk about it many times on this podcast, is there are multiple companies doing that type of thing. So how do you get the holy grail? How do you get the one company to rule them all? Because all the companies want that piece of the pie. And do they work together? You know, is there a consortium? Is that the word? Consortium?
Yeah, consortium.
Consortium. You know, that's the problem. Like, of course, I don't want to log anything. I don't think anybody enjoys doing that. So it's going to be AI. It's going to be computer vision and robots scanning things for us and saying what we are eating and what we shouldn't or shouldn't eat. So it's got to happen. It's just like, is this part of the piece of the puzzle? And what does that final thing look like?
Yeah, it'll be a consortium or it'll be a big technology player, platform player like Apple, for example, or Facebook or Google, who says, hey, we're going to build this into our platforms. If you're Apple, which already, like, I'm wearing an Apple Watch, I'm on a Mac, I have an iPhone, they're all talking to each other. They're kind of tracking my life already. And Apple's investing obviously in AI, which is actually part of the next story. But so maybe it's that, right? But I do think this will somehow be stitched together either through consortiums or through like just a big player saying, hey, this is a feature.
Well, it's also kind of similar to video games as well, where like there's indie games that come out and they try a bunch of things. and the bigger publishers don't want to make those take those chances, and then they let the indie try it all out, and then they go, you know what, we would love that in Fortnite, or we would love that in our new game that we're building. So it's like, yeah, a bunch of these companies, smaller companies, will try it and get it right, and then what will Apple do? Yeah, they'll
Yeah.
just swoop in and take it. So
Although Apple, I feel like, isn't as bad at that as, say, Amazon. Amazon's pretty notorious for saying, hey, why don't you partner with us? And then Amazon comes out with like a similar product
yeah,
or whatever. I think there's some companies that are worse at that than others. Trader Joe's is a good example in the retail
oh, we
space.
talked
They're
about that.
notorious for that. That's like the Trader Joe problem. I think there's an article. We have to talk about Trader Joe's early this year, but just said just that. But yeah, you're right. Sometimes they'll do it. Sometimes like Apple they'll just acquire and then we'll pay fair market value and make it a feature. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited for this though. Like I would like to be able to log all the calories. It's funny. I remember we had Mike Lee on the podcast about a couple months ago, and like he's the one that's writing kind of this futuristic fiction around food tech and where it can ultimately go. And he had that story of I think it was the Burlingtons, and the whole Burlington
Yeah.
family had this stomach sensor called Stacked. And I feel like this is maybe a less intrusive way to do that, but I think maybe that's the path we're going, where this is just going to be a sensor in your teeth or a sensor in your
Yeah.
stomach, and it's just tracking all those calories, all those things going into your body.
Yeah, it's the beginning stages of what we will have. So
Well, speaking of Apple and your pessimistic look at them,
hey, I didn't even. I just said they're going to do it.
That's true. That's true. Apple, as you may know, and we've talked about this on the podcast a little bit this year, they are moving more into home robotics. They nixed their car project, which they were working on for 10 years, which, by the way, I was thinking about this. They literally worked on a project for 10 years and just killed it. Like, couldn't they sell that off or partner someone? It just seemed like a weird thing
crazy
to me, quite honestly. Such an investment to put into a project and then kill it. But they took a lot of those employees and put them onto their home robot work. And finally, this week, Bloomberg had a story about what this robot could look like. And quite honestly, I found it hugely disappointing. Like they basically described a countertop home robotic device that essentially sounds like an iPad.
Yeah.
And sits on there like, okay, Apple's robot, which is going to be really exciting, is maybe not. It's going to be like an iPad on a stand. And then it will use Siri to interact with and has a robotic arm. So that sounds cool, but it just sounded less than what I expected.
It sounded in the past. I mean, literally, I wrote down on my notes, it currently runs a modified version of iPad OS. Okay, that's what I have on my iPad, right? That's not modern. You know what I mean?
Tim Apple, what are you doing, man? Get your stuff together and create something interesting. Like when I was thinking that the Apple home robot, man, I was thinking, okay, especially they're taking the car people and putting it on robotics, and then they put something that sits on your countertop. Now, the article in Bloomberg does say that there's another mobile device they're working on, so maybe it's a little more interesting. This first one is a smart home command center, kind of a video conferencing machine. But like you said, I feel like, didn't Facebook do the smart home conferencing machine like 5 years ago?
Yeah, it feels old. And I mean, you and I were talking about this off the podcast, but there's a show I'm watching called Sunny, which I don't think if you started it or not.
I'm about 3 in. Pretty good.
Okay, and it's on Apple, so there's an interesting connection. But it's showing a robot that's going around the house, human like, and it just feels like, yeah, that could be next month. Like we could build, or they are building that now, and so it's like that's what I'm thinking about when it comes about home robots, right? Something that actually has some agency, that has pulling out new technology and scrolling the internet in its own little brain. And is that too much right now? Is that too far? That's a whole other discussion. But yeah, you do that, and then you look at a box that's running iPad OS. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And the reason we're even bringing this up on the Food Tech News Show is we talked about the home robot a lot. There's been a couple mobile home robots announced this year. We're starting to see clues of these things that look like humanoids, right? That maybe actually can move around and carry your dishes, or maybe actually cook for you. And I thought, hey, maybe Apple is going to be one of those who comes up with something interesting. But it doesn't look like, at least initially, it'll be it'll be from Apple.
And I was just watching a YouTube vlogger who's in Japan, and they're like, out at a restaurant, and the robot's bringing them the food. You know what I mean? Like that's just straight up normal. So I just think of like, okay, well, it's not even doing that. So, anyways, we're poo pooing on Apple today, but
Yeah. Let's move on
sorry.
to the next story. And speaking of electronic vehicles, which Apple tried to do, they moved on, but there's a company still in it. And actually, my favorite electric vehicle company right now, if I ever do buy one, I might buy a Rivian because they have some cool models that they've teased for the future.
Mm.
Rivian is an American-based electric vehicle company. They have their SUV and they have a cool pickup truck that they do, and they seem like they're gaining a lot of momentum. I see them everywhere in Washington State, by the way, where my little town. I see people driving them a lot now. And electric vehicle maker Rivian has made an announcement yesterday of their travel kitchen, which is an accessory for their SUV and pickup models. And according to the company, the travel kitchen was specially designed for Rivian vehicles, and it fits on any tabletop surface with a source of power, within reach of a power source. And it includes a carrying case, customizable hangout lights and poles, a cutting board, and a drawer and insert. It is an induction cooktop. Naturally, it'd be kind of weird if like this electric vehicle company had like this giant like propane powered
Flame
cooking
coming
device.
out the back. Yeah.
That'd be like kind of weird if they were actually using gas. So maybe that goes without saying. But I thought this was pretty cool. I did a quick search, and granted, this is based on Mike's 10 minutes of internet research. I didn't see any similar things from Tesla or from other EV makers. Anyone who's listening, feel free to correct me if we're wrong. Send me an email, podcast@thespoon.tech, or shout me out on social. But I think this is the first I've ever seen of an EV company doing a travel kitchen.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, there's been appliances and things like this for vehicles, not specifically EV. And when I saw the video, I was like, this feels like it should be on Shark Tank. Like it straight up feels like, something that a small company would come up with and be like, this is a great thing to have on your vehicle. I don't have a vehicle, so this is like I'm off the table for this discussion.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
it looks cool, like it makes sense. It just seems like, yeah, it should just be part of what you get with the car, right?
Yeah, and there's been like energy centric or energy green cooking appliances like for RVs, etc., or obviously induction cooktops for RVs, but those are more tailored for these bigger type of camping things. This is actually just
Mm-hmm.
made specifically for the Rivian. I thought it looked pretty cool. If I had a Rivian, this would be something I would definitely consider. But I think it was smart, pretty cool.
I think you looked at the article because you want to get Rivian. That's what this is about.
Yeah, that's really all it's really about. But this final story is one that I thought was fun to write. I wrote it for the Spoon, and because I have been following this tiny countertop dishwasher trend ever
Yes.
since Tetra announced the countertop. Tetra was announced, I think, in CS 2018, which seems like a lifetime ago, which it was. And the Tetra, which was this cool looking, sexy looking countertop. And by the way, to put the words sexy and dishwasher together is really weird, but it really was like this cool, sexy looking countertop dishwasher. I think initially they said it's going to be $299, and it was in some ways the talk of CES, which is a surprise for a dishwasher, quite honestly. And ever since that time that category was introduced to me, I've been excited. But I followed the Tetra probably closer than anyone. I wrote a bunch of stories about it for the Spoon, and it never came out. The company basically was sold off, and the IP was bought by a mystery company. There were some others, like the Bob. There's literally a small countertop dishwasher called the Bob by a company out of France.
Mm.
Another called Shabash that did come out, but there's one actually shipping in the U.S. called the Capsule, and the Capsule dishwasher shipped to backers in 2022. It had done a Kickstarter campaign, and they announced their second generation just last week called the Capsule Solo. And so I'm pretty excited. We have a video which we can link to in the podcast notes, and for the YouTube video we can show people this.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what did you think? Did you look at the video? What did you think of this whole thing?
Yeah, I made a video for the Spoon about this, and I made a
Oh
quick
yeah,
little, yeah, like 30-second, 20-second video of it. And I think, well, I'll tell you about the joke in the video afterwards. But yeah, it is that kind of version of sexy. Like what was the other one called? The Tetra? Is that right?
The Tetra, yeah.
Tetra, yeah. I remember seeing that at CES too and thinking the same thing as you. Is like, wow, that's a cool design. This one's a cool design too. I mean, like I mentioned this, I think I forgot where I mentioned this, but and maybe I have mentioned in the video, but yeah, for people who have studio apartments, I think I mentioned in the video, this is perfect. Like if you don't have a dishwasher and you really need one because you cook all the time, you cook every night, this would be nice to have. This is perfect. And it's crazy. If you watch the video, we're showing it on this podcast, the video version. You'll see that it can fit pretty big frying pans, which is crazy because it's a small
It's
unit.
tall. It's
Yeah.
small footprint, but it's tall, and it reminded me just visually as they were carrying it around because it has like a little carrying
Yeah, you can
handle.
move it around from room to room.
It looks like those old kind of gaming PCs that sit on the ground.
Yes.
Like it had a tall metal frame that looked like a gaming PC.
Yeah, I think that literally is the whole video. I said this looks like a PC gaming tower, and you fits anything, and why not? Why not get it? The joke in the video, which I can tell you now, is I said just make sure you clean your dishes before you put them in there. Do a little bit of work. So I said point that at people who might not do that all the time. I don't know. Someone might be on the podcast right now that does it.
Oh yeah,
Necessarily
yeah. How did you know? Did
clean.
my wife must have told you? Like I don't do the big chunks. I do a little rinse. If it has big chunks, I'll push it in the garbage. But I feel like it's like cleaning the house before the house cleaner comes. What am I doing this for?
You just got to do a little bit. That's all I'm saying. And
A
so I
little
said that
bit.
in the
Okay,
video.
okay, that
Yeah,
makes sense.
little
That makes
nod
sense.
to you in the video. But no, yeah, I mean it's $299 too. Great price point, I think.
And it is pretty self-contained. You actually get these little water reservoirs where it actually will, have a little bit of water. And that's the thing about these. They're super, super resource light. You don't need a ton of water. It could wash a load of dishes on just a little container of water. And then and then it also has I think a dirty water module, but you can also just sit it next to your sink and it could just spit the water in there. It can connect to, I think, an input from your sink as well if you just want to sit it next to your sink. But yeah, I mean, there's been articles in the Seattle Times. I think there's been stories in other metros that most of the biggest chunk of new builds in the Seattle market for housing are single room or studio apartments.
Right.
Because it's super expensive to live in Seattle, as you know, and real estate is at a premium, but we just need more housing. And so a lot of the new housing are multi-tenant units. They're basically studio apartments. And so if you live in a studio apartment and you just want to conserve countertop space, or if you move into an old one, not even a new build, some of these old mother-in-law apartments don't have dishwashers. This is perfect for that. This is perfect for that.
Yeah, there's a lot of Seattle right now. So,
and then we talked about like, hey, heading in your RV, going somewhere. For those of you maybe are retirees and you have a big house, but you're also heading out in your tiny mobile house in an RV somewhere, this is like perfect for the road. Just throw this guy in the road.
Yeah, they really said like portable, and they're not kidding. So.
And it's funny, the promo video, they show these funny videos for Kickstarters. They have a Kickstarter and they have this young guy with his little portable dishwasher and he brings it to grandma's house. I don't know why the video, he brings it to grandma's house. It was pretty funny.
Yeah, that is
grandma watches with pleasure and amazement as her dishes are washed by this little tiny, little kind of dishwasher.
He just wanted to show it off.
Yeah. Why not? But hey, we all like to show off our technology to our grandmas. I don't know if like the dishwasher would be the one I'd show her, but maybe she gets that. Maybe she gets that. But Carlos, this has been a lot of fun. Sometimes we need to do these just by ourselves.
Yeah, this is fun. And most of the time, or all the time, we know all the stories because, we're either making videos and you're writing them. And so let's talk about them on a podcast.
On a podcast. All right, Carlos, this has been a lot of fun. And hey, everyone, check out the video. As always, check out the spoon. We have our big food AI summit coming up in September 25th. And just keep on listening and we'll talk to y'all soon.
And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's a bunch of videos on there and TikTok and Instagram.
What he said. Bye, everyone.
Bye.